The ocean is both cradle and tomb. It breathes with the tides, carrying life upon its waves, yet it holds within its depths a silence older than humanity itself. In its shifting currents, civilizations have risen, and in its storms, they have been erased. And yet, there is a place where that silence grows heavier. A place where the sea seems to swallow not only vessels, but memory itself. Ships vanish as though dissolved into the horizon. Aircraft descend into blue air and never touch the ground again. No wreckage, no signals, no farewells, only absence. They call it the Bermuda Triangle. But perhaps it is not a place at all. Perhaps it is a question whispered by the earth itself. How can something so vast, so open, conceal such perfect emptiness? This is no ordinary mystery of storms or human error. For centuries, navigators, scientists, and storytellers have pressed against this silence, trying to hear what lies beneath. Compasses falter. Clouds form in hexagonal scars across the sky. Invisible waves rise from the deep, striking with the force of giants. And yet the greater mystery remains, not how these things happen, but why here, in this narrow corridor of sea and sky, the laws of nature seem to bend into uncertainty. The Bermuda Triangle is not a myth. It is a mirror reflecting back the limits of human knowledge, a reminder that even in the modern world, the Earth still guards secrets that science has not yet claimed. Long before the Bermuda Triangle was traced upon modern maps, before charts marked its coordinates between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda, the sea itself had already spoken of it. To the first peoples of the Caribbean and Atlantic, the ocean was never only water. It was alive, restless, unpredictable, a vast, breathing wilderness that resisted ownership. Their oral traditions carried stories not of geography, but of forces, presences, and hungos hidden within the waves. Among the Taíno, one of the earliest peoples of the Caribbean, the ocean was a place of creation and destruction, a boundary between the mortal and the divine. Fishermen told of currents that would suddenly shift, dragging canoes into waters from which no return was possible. In the silence of night voyages, they whispered of ghostly lights that glowed on the horizon, flickering like torches suspended in the air. To them, these were not lights of other sailors, but signals of realms beyond, warnings of spirits dwelling in the sea's deepest vaults. Even farther north, along the coasts of the Atlantic, Norse sagas carried across centuries of seafaring spoke of waters where compasses failed and skies blurred. They told of magnetic stones, lodestones, that pulled needles from their true path, confusing sailors who depended on the stars. For the Vikings, such anomalies were threads woven into their cosmology, signs that the world beneath the sea was layered with forces unseen. These early voices echo into modern science. Today, geophysicists map regions where the Earth's magnetic field deviates, where invisible lines of force bend unexpectedly. One such agonic line, the place where true north and magnetic north align, has long drifted across the Atlantic, intersecting with the waters now called the Bermuda Triangle. What was once legend of spirits and shifting skies may have been the first human encounter with this subtle but real phenomenon. The unseen architecture of Earth's magnetic field pressing against human navigation. Yet for centuries, myth was the only vocabulary available. To describe the unpredictable was to clothe it in superstition. Sailors spoke of cursed waters, of demons stirring whirlpools beneath the hull, of sea monsters whose eyes glowed in the night. These tales, dismissed by modern rationality, reveal not foolishness, but an ancient intuition, that there are places where human instruments falter, where orientation itself dissolves. In the autumn of 1492, a new chapter in this story was written. Christopher Columbus, crossing the Atlantic under the banner of Spain, kept a log of his voyage, notes that would later become infamous in the lore of the Bermuda Triangle. His men grew restless when they noticed their compasses no longer pointed steadily north. The needles trembled, swayed, and then drifted away from the expected direction. To them, it was a sign that the heavens themselves were shifting. Panic spread through the crew, for to lose north was to lose the only anchor in an otherwise endless ocean. Columbus tried to calm their fear, suggesting the anomaly came not from the heavens, but from the compass itself, which was imperfect. Yet even he recorded his unease. The error was too great, too sudden, too unexplained. With centuries of hindsight, scientists now know that this region lay close to the Oceanic line, where the Earth's magnetic field causes compasses to point directly to true north, eliminating the difference between magnetic and geographic north. But to men sailing into uncharted waters in the 15th century, it was as though the very laws of nature had faltered. And then there were the lights. On the night of September 15th, Columbus described a glow, a faint flickering at the edge of the horizon. Later, he noted a great flame of fire that fell into the sea, possibly a meteor burning through the atmosphere. Modern explanations point to natural causes. Bioluminescent plankton stirred into glowing turbulence, meteors streaking into the ocean, or atmospheric mirages bending distant light. Yet for sailors unprepared for the vastness of the Atlantic night, these visions were omens, signs that they had crossed into a haunted domain. The journals of Columbus mark one of the earliest written records of anomalies within the Triangle's waters. But they are not isolated. As European exploration intensified in the centuries that followed, so too did reports of strange happenings along this corridor of sea. Merchant captains described compasses that spun without cause. Others spoke of dead waters, places where the wind died suddenly and ships languished in a suffocating stillness, as though the ocean itself had taken hold. Behind each tale lies both a kernel of truth and a layer of mystery. Meteorologists today recognize sudden microbursts of wind, invisible until they strike, capable of flattening sails or capsizing ships. Oceanographers study rogue waves, towering walls of water that rise without warning from otherwise calm seas. Mariners of the past lacked these words, these sciences, so they reached instead for symbols: the cursed sea, the phantom light, the silence that devours. Thus, the Bermuda Triangle was never born from a single event. It emerged like a shadow in human memory, piece by piece, through warnings passed between generations. To the first peoples of the Caribbean, it was a realm where spirits claimed the living. To European explorers, it was an unpredictable ocean where instruments betrayed and stars lied. And to the sailors who followed, it became a whispered caution, a reminder that mastery of the sea was always partial, and the abyss always greater than the ship. In the vast architecture of myth, these warnings carry a deeper meaning. They are the first record of human confrontation with uncertainty, where the line between natural phenomenon and supernatural presence blurred into one. And in their way, they anticipated what science would only later confirm: that the Earth itself is a restless body, its magnetic field drifting, its atmosphere turbulent, its oceans capable of violence beyond expectation. But the ancients, without satellites or physics, named it differently. They called it cursed, enchanted, forbidden. They gave it form through stories, shadows, and superstition. And though centuries have passed, their warnings linger, embedded in the very name, the Bermuda Triangle. For in these early voices lies the seed of the mystery that would come to define an entire region of the ocean. A mystery that endures, not because of what is seen, but because of what is absent. Wreckage without explanation, signals without closure, vanishings without farewell. A silence that first spoke through myth and still speaks through science. The ancient warnings were not wrong. They were incomplete. The Bermuda Triangle would grow, in time, from legend into data, from whispered superstition into scientific enigma. But long before modern charts gave it boundaries, the sea had already drawn its own. The 16th century marked a turning of the tide. The ocean, once a boundary that divided worlds, became a bridge that stitched them together. From the coasts of Europe, sails unfurled like wings, carrying explorers, merchants, and empires across the Atlantic. This was the dawn of the Great Maritime Age, when the sea was no longer seen as an endless wilderness, but as a highway of promise, a corridor of wealth, conquest, and discovery. Yet beneath this optimism lingered unease. For in charting the seas, humanity also charted its mysteries. And nowhere did those mysteries accumulate more heavily than in the waters between the Americas and Europe, where the Bermuda Triangle quietly waited. The Spanish treasure fleets were among the first to cross it with regularity. Laden with silver from the mines of Potosí, gold from New Granada, and emeralds from Colombia, their galleons traced routes north through the Caribbean, then eastward across the open Atlantic. Spain's empire depended on these crossings. Each ship was a floating treasury, its loss a blow not only to wealth, but to power itself. And yet, fleets disappeared. Entire squadrons were claimed by storms, their hulls shattered against reefs, their wreckage scattered across the seafloor. At first, these were seen as tragedies of chance, for hurricanes roamed these latitudes with violence beyond comprehension. But in the logs of survivors, whispers persisted. Compasses wavered inexplicably. Currents pulled against expectation, dragging ships into paths they had not chosen. Captains spoke of days when the horizon blurred, when haze hung low and the sky itself seemed to lose direction. By the 17th century, English and Dutch merchants joined the fray. Their East and West India companies extended networks of trade that wrapped the globe, and with them came fleets of merchantmen threading through the Triangle's waters. These captains were trained, disciplined, armed with the best instruments Europe could craft. Yet still the accounts appeared. Voyages delayed by weeks, the winds and currents should have sped them home. Ships emerging battered, their crews disoriented, claiming their compasses spun without reason. Navigation was the very foundation of empire. The astrolabe, the cross-staff, and eventually the sextant allowed sailors to read the stars. But the compass, simple, steady, magnetic, was the instrument of trust. When it faltered, so too did the illusion of mastery. The age of exploration was built upon a fragile faith that the sea, though vast, could be tamed by mathematics and magnetism. The Bermuda Triangle seemed to test that faith at every turn. Colonial powers responded with mapping. Expeditions traced coastlines, measured depths, and plotted the Gulf Stream, a powerful current that threads through the triangle like a living artery. First described by Ponce de Leon and later studied by Benjamin Franklin, this current was both gift and threat. It could hasten voyages to Europe, carrying fleets like a conveyor belt. But for those who misjudged its strength, it pulled ships far from course, sweeping them into open waters or dashing them against unseen shoals. Here lies a truth that science continues to confirm. The triangle is not a void, but a convergence. Winds, currents, storms, and magnetic anomalies intersect here with uncommon intensity. In the 18th century, without satellites or meteorology, sailors faced these forces blind. They filled the silence with superstition. Logs describe enchanted waters, places where the sea boiled without wind, or where strange lights shimmered beneath the waves. Some captains refused to sail certain routes, even when they shortened the crossing. Better to lose time than to lose everything. And yet, commerce demanded risk. For every fleet that vanished, dozens succeeded, their cargoes feeding the insatiable appetites of Europe's markets. It is here the paradox deepened. The triangle consumed lives and ships, yet it also became one of the most traveled corridors in the world. Its danger was undeniable, but so too was its necessity. Historians today sift through these accounts with cautious hands. Many losses can be traced to hurricanes, to piracy, to the perils of wooden hulls on uncharted reefs. But not all. Some ships left port, recorded by meticulous logs, and were never seen again. No storm was reported, no wreckage recovered. Their absence entered the ledgers of insurance companies as lost without trace. In the language of commerce, the mystery grew. Insurance underwriters in London noted the unusual frequency of disappearances in these waters. Mariners' charts bore subtle warnings, marks not of reefs or islands, but of reputation. Beware these seas, the margins seem to whisper. They do not forgive. This tension between knowledge and uncertainty reflects a larger truth of the age of exploration. Empires projected power across oceans, claiming dominion over continents, yet their ships were fragile islands of wood and rope upon a wilderness that dwarfed them. For every voyage that brought riches, another slipped into silence. And in the triangle, that silence seemed deeper, more absolute, more final. Science would eventually offer explanations. Today we know that the Gulf Stream can carry debris far from a wreck site, scattering evidence across hundreds of miles. We know that hurricanes can rise from calm seas within hours, leaving no time for signals or survival. We know, too, that the Earth's magnetic field is not uniform, that instruments in the 16th and 17th centuries were crude compared to modern precision. Yet these truths, though valid, cannot erase the pattern of unease woven through the centuries. The age of exploration did not solve the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. It amplified it. With every voyage, with every log, with every disappearance, the triangle was carved deeper into human imagination. A place not merely of storms and currents, but of betrayal, where the tools of progress themselves seemed to turn against their makers. Even now, archives preserve the fragile handwriting of those who crossed these waters. Some entries are calm, scientific, detailing wind speed and latitude. Others are jagged, hurried, recording fear. The compass spins madly, the sea glows as though lit from beneath. We are delayed, we cannot explain why. Such voices remind us that exploration was never only triumph. It was terror, endurance, and surrender. The ocean gave, and the ocean took away. And within the Bermuda Triangle, it seemed to take with greater hunger. By the end of the 18th century, colonial powers had mapped much of the known world. The Age of Enlightenment declared that reason would conquer superstition. But the triangle remained unmoved. For even as charts grew more precise, its reputation endured. An expanse of sea, marked not by what was present, but by what was absent. It was a silence that no empire could tame. The Bermuda Triangle stood, at the dawn of the modern age, as a reminder. The world was still wider, darker, and more unknowable than any fleet could conquer. And its warnings were only just beginning.
The 20th century was meant to be an age of mastery. Steel replaced wood, engines replaced sails, and wireless radios carried voices across the void of ocean. Humanity, it seemed, had finally tamed the seas. Yet in the waters of the Western Atlantic, silence continued to reign. It was in this new century, with its machines and its confidence, that the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle was reborn. In March of 1918, the USS Cyclops departed from the port of Salvador, Brazil, bound for Baltimore. She was no fragile vessel of the colonial age. She was a colossus of her time, a 19,000-ton naval collier designed to feed the growing hunger of steel warships. Her engines roared with coal, her holds carry thousands of tons of manganese ore, and her crew of 309 men trusted in her strength. Yet somewhere between Barbados and the coast of the United States, she disappeared. No signal, no wreckage, no survivors. The Cyclops simply ceased to exist. It was the largest non-combat loss of life in the history of the United States Navy. And to this day, no trace of her has ever been found. Storms were suggested, yet no hurricane was reported in her path. Mutiny was whispered, yet the Cyclops was commanded by a decorated officer and no evidence of descent ever surfaced. Mechanical failure was considered, but even a broken ship leaves debris, oil slicks, fragments scattered across the waves. Here, there was nothing, only absence. The vanishing of the Cyclops became the first great modern puzzle of the Triangle. And it would not be the last. In the decades that followed, merchant vessels reported their own losses. The Proteus in 1941, a sister ship to the Cyclops, vanished under eerily similar circumstances. The Nereus, another sister, disappeared the same year while carrying bauxite from the Caribbean. Again, no wreckage. Again, no survivors. To the sailors of the Atlantic, a pattern was emerging. An invisible hand erasing ships of iron as easily as storms once erased ships of wood. Naval reports tried to resist the rising tide of superstition. Hurricanes, they said, could strike with sudden violence, tearing apart ships too slow to escape. Submarine attacks, they suggested, might explain wartime vanishings. Yet the silence persisted. A submarine may sink a ship, but it does not erase its presence. Debris floats. Signals are sent, but in the Triangle, ships seem to dissolve, leaving only unanswered questions. It was in these years that the phrase Bermuda Triangle began to enter public imagination. Newspapers, eager for sensation, tied together scattered events, weaving them into a single narrative of cursed waters. Insurance ledgers, naval reports, and shipping manifests transformed into material for myths. The idea was born not in science, but in silence. Because silence leaves space, and humans fill space with story. Even as the myth grew, the waters themselves remained indifferent. Ships still passed daily, thousands each year, most arriving safely at their ports. Yet the occasional disappearance, statistically rare but emotionally vast, was enough to seed fear. For if steel giants could vanish without trace, what safety could there truly be? Science searched for rationality. Meteorologists pointed to the seasonal violence of Atlantic storms, their winds capable of snapping steel like twigs. Oceanographers studied the Gulf Stream, a current swift enough to scatter wreckage far from the site of disaster, erasing the evidence of catastrophe. Geologists noted the seafloor of the region with its deep trenches, capable of swallowing sinking ships whole. And indeed, each explanation carried weight. Hurricanes strike swiftly, the Gulf Stream is relentless, and the abyss is deep. Yet even taken together, these truths did not erase the unease.
The ocean has many ways of swallowing its prey. In the ordinary disaster, its violence leaves scars. A hurricane scatters wreckage across the tide. A fire at sea spreads oil slicks across the waves. Even war, with its submarines and torpedoes, leaves flotsam to tell its story. But in the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, absence itself became the narrative. Here, disasters unfolded without evidence. The sea did not roar. It erased. This silence of wreckage is what transforms scattered tragedies into a singular enigma. For families awaiting word from the Cyclops or the Nereus, the waiting was infinite. No debris arrived. No message reached the shore. In maritime history, the ocean is cruel but rarely mute. In the Triangle, it was not cruelty that unsettled, but silence. Such silence gave rise to a troubling inconsistency. Thousands upon thousands of vessels passed safely through these waters each year. Cargo ships traced their routes between Caribbean islands and the American mainland without incident. Airliners, by the mid-20th century, carved invisible highways through the skies, carrying millions of passengers unscathed. And yet, in the same waters, other journeys ended with sudden catastrophe. Why some and not others? Science offers patterns, probabilities, clusters. Oceanographers note that regions of heavy traffic naturally produce higher counts of disaster. Statistically, more ships will vanish where more ships travel. And yet, in the triangle, the disappearances seem to gather in unusual clusters, years when silence multiplied, when the sea seemed hungrier than before. The 1940s saw a string of vanishings that climaxed with Flight 19, 5 Navy bombers that dissolved into the horizon. The 1960s echoed with the loss of merchant ships and small aircraft that never arrived. Some researchers have attempted to tie these clusters to atmospheric cycles, the rise and fall of the North Atlantic Oscillation, or the decades-long breathing of the El Niño Southern Oscillation. These climate rhythms, shifting wind and current across oceans, could conspire to make certain decades more violent, certain skies less forgiving. Yet, the match is imperfect, like a shadow that almost but not quite overlays the shape of events. And so the mystery deepened. For within this corridor of sea, probability began to feel like fate. The speculation grew louder as silence persisted. Statisticians argued that the triangle was merely an illusion, a distortion of human memory. Ships are lost all over the world, they said. The Pacific swallows far more. The Indian Ocean rages with storms. Yet the human imagination clings to the Atlantic. Perhaps it was not the sea that was unusual, but the story told about it. But stories matter. They shape perception, and perception bends the weight of evidence. When the Cyclops vanished, it was tragedy. When Flight 19 followed, it was myth. And by the time countless smaller vessels joined the list, the narrative had already written itself. The Bermuda Triangle was no longer numbers. It was symbol. Still, symbols emerge from somewhere. Scientists who probed the silence searched for mechanisms hidden beneath the myth. Some pointed to methane hydrates locked in the sediments of the seafloor. These frozen gas crystals, if released by landslide or tectonic shift, could erupt into vast plumes, reducing the density of seawater and dragging ships under as though the ocean itself had turned to quicksand. Aircraft flying through such eruptions might encounter turbulence or even engine failure. Yet evidence of such events in the triangle is rare, and no eruption has ever been observed swallowing a vessel in modern times. Others turned their gaze upward, to the sky. The region is known for sudden microbursts, columns of descending air that strike with catastrophic force, slamming ships with waves and overwhelming aircraft with turbulence. Satellites have captured hexagonal cloud formations above these waters, weather patterns that can generate ferocious, localized winds. These phenomena, real and measurable, could account for some losses. Yet they remain incomplete answers. They explain violence, but not silence. They leave open the same question: where is the wreckage? Because in the ordinary mathematics of disaster, debris is inevitable. Metal sinks, but wood floats, oil spreads, cargo drifts. Even in the deep, some trace remains. Yet time and again, the triangle has left nothing at all. This absence has drawn some to suggest that human certainty itself becomes unreliable here. Pilots speak of compasses spinning wildly, of instruments giving conflicting readings. Columbus himself noted his compass behaving strangely in 1492, as if the magnetic field bent differently in these waters. Scientists confirm that near Bermuda, the line of true north and magnetic north briefly overlap, a rarity on Earth's surface. To the ancient navigator, it was confusion. To the modern aviator, it could be disorientation, a subtle tilt that grows into catastrophe when layered with storms and fatigue. Still, a compass error does not erase wreckage. and so the paradox persists. Some argue that the silence itself is an illusion, that debris is not absent, only scattered, carried by the Gulf Stream into the vast Atlantic, dispersed until no pattern remains. A ship's fragments could wash ashore in Africa months later, unrecognized, unnamed. An aircraft's wreckage could sink into the abyssal trenches, deeper than any search has yet reached. The silence, then, would be not supernatural, but statistical. The ocean is vast, human searches are small, and absence is simply what remains when effort fails. And yet there is still a lingering unease. For if it is only chance, why here? Why does this region, among all others, bear the weight of centuries of stories, warnings, and unanswered questions? The Bermuda Triangle became, by mid-century, more than a geographic zone. It became a mirror, reflecting back the human need for certainty in a universe where certainty does not exist. It was no longer about ships or planes. It was about the trust placed in science, in navigation, in technology, and the shock when that trust fractured. For the Triangle is not a place where physics fails. It is a place where human certainty fails, where the line between knowledge and mystery grows blurred, where the silence of wreckage becomes not only a maritime puzzle, but a philosophical one. Perhaps that is why the idea endures, because in its silence, the Triangle asks a question that science has not yet fully answered. Not simply what happened here, but why do we need to know? For every vessel lost without trace, there are thousands that pass unharmed. For every pilot who never returns, there are millions who cross the skies without incident. And yet the myth grows stronger, precisely because of its inconsistency. Predictability comforts, randomness terrifies. In the end, the Bermuda Triangle may be neither curse nor anomaly. It may be nothing more than probability stretched across the immensity of ocean. But probability, when dressed in silence and loss, becomes mystery. And mystery, when it resists explanation, becomes myth. The age of superstition had given way to the age of science. But in the Bermuda Triangle, the two merged. Myths clothed themselves in data. Data dissolved into silence. And humanity was left staring at the horizon, still asking why. The mystery had deepened, not because of what was found, but because of what was not. And in that absence, the legend only grew stronger.
For centuries, the sea had been an adversary, but a familiar one. Sailors feared storms, but they could see their coming. They feared reefs, but charts warned of their presence. They feared mutiny, but that was the danger of men, not of maps. The rise of modern navigation was meant to still those fears. Compass, sextant, chronometer. Each invention was a promise that the sea could be tamed, that its endless blue could be divided into coordinates, numbers, and certainty. Later, with the arrival of radio signals and aviation beacons, humankind declared its dominion more boldly. Aircraft could cross oceans guided not by stars, but by invisible geometry in the sky. Precision replaced intuition. Instruments replaced faith. Yet in the Bermuda Triangle, those instruments sometimes faltered. The shock was not merely the vanishing of ships and planes. It was the betrayal of science itself. If the compass spun wild, if radio signals grew faint, if coordinates drifted into impossibility, then the very foundation of navigation, trust, was undone. Christopher Columbus recorded such unease in 1492, when he noted his compass behaving strangely as his ships neared the Bahamas. Centuries later, aviators would report similar anomalies, as though the Earth's magnetic skin was misaligned in these waters. Scientists explained that the triangle is one of the few regions where magnetic north and true north briefly coincide, causing compasses to point with deceptive clarity. A minor detail, harmless to the trained navigator, yet to those already weary, already lost in storm or cloud, the smallest tilt could become disaster. This was the heart of the fear. If even the most experienced captain, the most disciplined pilot, could be led astray, then skill was no shield. The triangle erased the line between novice and master. It reminded humanity that technology is not immunity. The case of Flight 19 illustrated this fragility with haunting clarity. These were not amateurs. They were U.S. Navy pilots, trained in both discipline and science. They carried compasses, fuel gauges, radios, and yet, once confusion entered, the entire formation dissolved into silence. Their instruments became mistrusted. Their maps felt unreliable. And when the pilots doubted their own tools, chaos followed. In the cockpit, numbers lost their authority. The sky itself became an unsolvable riddle. This is what sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The ocean could take lives, but now it seemed to take reason. The fear was not only for those lost, but for the principles of navigation itself. If compasses could be deceived, if maps could lose their meaning, then humanity's dominion over the sea was revealed to be fragile, perhaps even illusory. Oceanographers studied the magnetic field of the region, mapping its variations, confirming that shifts and overlaps could indeed disorient the unprepared. Meteorologists examined the storms that brewed suddenly in these waters, noting how fast-moving squalls and microbursts could overwhelm even skilled aviators. Engineers studied the reliability of instruments under electromagnetic stress, suspecting interference from both the ionosphere and sudden weather changes. Each explanation provided fragments of understanding, but never closure. The silence of wreckage remained. And so, the scientific shock was not only about technology failing, it was about trust unraveling. Navigation is more than a technical process. It is an act of faith. Faith in the compass needle, faith in the map's lines, faith that the tools will hold steady against chaos. When the Bermuda Triangle stripped away that faith, humanity glimpsed its own vulnerability. The 20th century was meant to be the triumph of mastery. Machines crossed oceans, signals spanned continents. Astronauts began to escape Earth itself. And yet, in one corner of the Atlantic, ancient uncertainty returned. The sea once more felt boundless, unknowable, and sovereign. To scientists, the Bermuda Triangle became a test of humility. It reminded them that knowledge is not the end of mystery, but a fragile thread stretched across it. For every equation explaining magnetic drift, there was still a pilot's final words: "We are completely lost," echoing like a wound in the progress of technology. And so the triangle grew, not only as a geographic question, but as a symbol of scientific limitation. If maps can fail, if instruments can lie, then even in the modern age, humanity's dominion over the sea is conditional. Conditional on forces it does not fully understand. Conditional on a world where silence can erase not only ships and planes, but certainty itself. Mysteries grow darker when wrapped in silence. And so, across the 20th century, the Bermuda Triangle drew not only storytellers, but scientists, investigators, and governments determined to peel back the veil. If ships and planes were vanishing without trace, then the tools of modern inquiry, data, sonar, meteorology, would be summoned to demand answers. The U.S. Navy was among the first to probe. After the disappearance of Flight 19 and the countless questions that followed, naval investigators pored through logs, weather reports, and the scattered fragments of radio transmissions. Their official statements sought to quiet the storm of speculation. They spoke of navigational error, of inexperience in difficult skies, of storms that brewed too suddenly for pilots to escape. And yet, even as the Navy attempted to close the case, the absence of wreckage whispered louder than the reports themselves. The investigation concluded, but the silence persisted. The Coast Guard followed suit, documenting countless incidents in these waters with the sober language of official record. Their files reveal a pattern both ordinary and unsettling. Many entries are accidents easily explained. Storms capsizing small craft, vessels overloaded or poorly maintained, engines failing in turbulent seas. But scattered among these are cases that resist simplicity. Ships last seen under clear skies, radio contact maintained until the very moment of disappearance, aircraft vanishing from radar without distress call or debris. For every ordinary tragedy, there was one that stretched the boundaries of reason. To move beyond anecdote, scientists turned to the data of the sea itself. Meteorologists traced the patterns of weather over the triangle, mapping the invisible forces that shaped its skies. They discovered that this corner of the Atlantic is among the most volatile on Earth. Warm currents from the Gulf Stream collide with cooler winds descending from the continent, brewing storms with little warning. Satellites observe towering thunderclouds rising from clear horizons, birthing waterspouts that twisted the sea into columns reaching skyward. For vessels caught unprepared, these sudden formations were not survivable. And then there were the rogue waves. Once considered sailors' myth, these walls of water, rising 30 meters or more from otherwise calm seas, were confirmed by satellite altimetry in the late 20th century. The triangle lies in one of the corridors where ocean currents, storms, and continental shelf all conspire to magnify the sea's violence. A cargo ship struck broadside by such a wave would vanish within minutes, leaving little to no wreckage on the surface. For the first time, a natural mechanism aligned with the silence. But while rogue waves could explain some disappearances, they could not explain them all. So investigators turned their gaze downward, to the ocean floor. Using sonar mapping and submersible exploration, they charted a landscape as dramatic as any mountain range. The Puerto Rico Trench, lying at the eastern edge of the triangle, plunges 8 kilometers into the Earth, deeper than the height of Everest. Nearby, tectonic plates grind and shift, birthing earthquakes and submarine landslides. In this restless geology, some scientists found a potential culprit: methane hydrates. Locked within the sediments of the seafloor, these crystalline structures of gas and water sleep in unstable balance. If disturbed by quake or landslide, vast plumes of methane could erupt, turning seawater to froth. Any ship caught above would find its buoyancy destroyed, sinking in seconds as though pulled into the earth. Aircraft flying through such a plume might suffer engine flameout, their combustion starved of oxygen. In laboratory conditions, the theory seemed possible. But in the triangle, no such eruption has yet been directly observed. The mechanism remained a ghost, credible but unproven. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the scientific guardian of America's seas, has long sought to bring calm to the storm of myth. Their reports frame the triangle as a region of heavy traffic, volatile weather, and treacherous seas. To NOAA, the legend is born not of anomaly, but of accumulation. More ships, more planes, more storms, more accidents, and thus more stories. They argue that the numbers do not exceed the global average, that the Bermuda Triangle is no deadlier than any other busy crossroads of the sea. Yet even Noah's measured voice cannot erase the unease, for the very need to issue such statements reveals the power of the myth. The silence of wreckage, the strangeness of clusters, the echoes of instruments gone awry. These details cling to the imagination, demanding more than statistics. Science gathers its evidence with patience, each tool peeling back a layer of uncertainty. Weather satellites reveal the fury of sudden storms. Oceanographic buoys record the pulse of rogue waves. Sonar maps chart trenches and faults in the seafloor. Each discovery illuminates part of the story, and yet each also deepens the question. For every storm explained, another silence remains. For every rogue wave measured, another disappearance resists. Perhaps that is the true power of the Bermuda Triangle. Not that it defies science, but that it defies finality. Investigations multiply, explanations accumulate, but none erase the sense that something here is unresolved. In the 21st century, autonomous drones skim the surface, satellites gaze unblinking from orbit, and deep-sea robots descend into trenches that no human has touched. Still, the enigma persists. Science has mapped the dangers, but has not tamed them. The evidence has been gathered, but the silence has not been broken. The Bermuda Triangle remains, not as a hole in knowledge, but as a reminder of its limits. A reminder that even in an age of data, there are places where numbers do not silence questions, but multiply them. Here, in these restless waters, science presses forward, yet the mystery endures.
Escalation/mystery deepens. The sea is a keeper of secrets, but even secrets usually leave fragments behind. Wood drifts ashore. Oil slicks spread like bruises on the water. Wreckage testifies to violence past. But in the Bermuda Triangle, too often, the story ends without evidence. Silence replaces debris. Absence replaces explanation. And in that absence, the mystery does not weaken, it grows. It was this silence of wreckage that transformed ordinary accidents into legend. When the USS Cyclops failed to arrive in 1918, families expected at least some trace, a message, a fragment, a lifeboat drifting toward shore. Nothing came. When Flight 19 dissolved into static in 1945, the Navy sent search aircraft into the skies. One of those rescue planes vanished as well. No fragment, no bodies, no fuel slick. Just silence layered upon silence. This absence posed a deeper riddle than loss itself. For in the normal order of disaster, the ocean leaves clues. Here, it seemed to erase them. And yet, inconsistency haunted the story. Thousands of vessels crossed the triangle unharmed each year. Aircraft carried millions of passengers across its skies with no hint of danger. For many, it was simply a corridor of commerce, as ordinary as any other sea. But then, without warning, certain journeys ended catastrophically. Why some and not others? Why silence in one case and survival in another? Scientists began to search for patterns, clusters of vanishings that might coincide with natural cycles. Some noted that the 1940s and 1960s seemed marked by unusual concentrations of disappearances. Could these coincide with fluctuations in the North Atlantic Oscillation, or the long breathing of El Niño cycles across the ocean? Meteorological data revealed rhythms in storm frequency, but the match was imprecise. The ocean's memory is too vast to yield its secrets easily, and so speculation deepened. Some argue that the triangle was no mystery at all. That was a statistical illusion, born from the sheer volume of ships and planes traveling through. The Pacific, after all, swallows more vessels by number. The Indian Ocean is more violent, but the imagination did not cling to those seas. It clung here, to this corridor where myth and modernity collided. For when science could not supply certainty, myth rushed in to fill the void. Each silence became a symbol, each vanishing a story told around the world. The triangle became more than a patch of ocean. It became a threshold between order and chaos, knowledge and uncertainty, faith and technology, and the abyss that swallows it whole. Still, scientists pressed further. They mapped rogue waves, towering walls of water that strike without warning. They traced the paths of storms that seem to blossom from nowhere in these skies. They studied magnetic anomalies where true north and magnetic north briefly align, nudging compasses into error. Each mechanism explained some disappearances. None explained them all. The silence of wreckage remained. Some argued that the silence itself is an illusion. That debris is not absent, but scattered, swept swiftly away by the Gulf Stream, dispersed across the Atlantic, hidden in trenches deeper than Everest is tall. A ship might leave fragments, but the ocean is vast and human searches are brief. The absence, then, may be not supernatural, but statistical. And yet, the mind resists this explanation. For absence has a power of its own. To say it is scattered does not erase the image of a plane dissolving from radar, of a ship failing to answer its final call. Probability may soothe the mathematician, but it does not silence the family waiting on shore. Thus, the Bermuda Triangle grew into something greater than a place. It became a symbol of uncertainty itself, a reminder that human mastery, maps, compasses, instruments, can fail without warning. That even in an age of science, there are corridors of the earth where silence prevails. It is here that the mystery escalates, not through new vanishings alone, but through what they mean. Theories, speculations, the Bermuda Triangle does not yield its truths easily. In the silence of wreckage, explanations multiply. Some are grounded in science, others in speculation, and some in a twilight zone between the two. Each theory, whether rational or fantastical, reflects a deeper question. How far can human knowledge reach before it falters at the edge of the unknown? The first and most common answer lies in the sea itself. The Atlantic is a restless giant, sculpted by invisible currents. The Gulf Stream, flowing like a vast conveyor belt, moves faster than any river on Earth. A vessel that founders in its path can vanish within hours, debris swept hundreds of miles away before searchers even begin. Storms form with brutal suddenness, conjured by warm waters colliding with cool air. Hurricanes, waterspouts, and rogue waves rise without warning. In such conditions, a wooden schooner or even a steel warship can be overwhelmed. Science points here first, reminding us that nature requires no myth to destroy. But storms alone cannot explain every silence. So researchers have looked downward into the seafloor. The ocean bed of the triangle is not uniform. It is scarred by deep trenches, ridges, and slopes where tectonic plates meet and shift. Among these scars lie vast reserves of methane hydrates, frozen gas trapped beneath sediments. Under certain conditions, these hydrates can destabilize, releasing clouds of methane that erupt upward into the sea. Laboratory experiments have shown that ships caught in such eruptions could lose buoyancy instantly, slipping beneath the surface without time for a distress call. A rare event, perhaps, but not an impossible one. Then there are the skies. Pilots have long reported strange atmospheric phenomena over the triangle, clouds that form sharp, hexagonal patterns, violent microbursts of wind, and lightning that dances horizontally across the horizon. Satellite imagery has revealed peculiar air bombs, pockets of high-energy wind that strike downward with hurricane force. An aircraft caught unaware could lose control in seconds. Such bursts leave no trace behind, only silence. One line of thought looks to the planet's magnetism. The Earth's magnetic field is not uniform. It ripples and shifts, shaped by the churning of molten iron in the core. In a few rare locations, magnetic north and true north align so precisely that compasses become deceptive, pulling navigators off course without their knowledge. Could the Bermuda Triangle be one such region, where magnetism conspires with weather to create lethal traps? The mystery remains. And then, beyond the threshold of orthodox science, the more extraordinary theories emerge. Some imagine the triangle as a place where dimensions thin, a corridor where space-time fold upon itself. In this view, a ship does not sink but slips, vanishing into another layer of reality beyond human detection. Physicists, while cautious, acknowledge that wormholes and quantum anomalies are mathematically possible, though unproven. To invoke them here is speculative, but the mystery invites such leaps. The unexplained light seen by Columbus in 1492, the strange orbs reported by pilots in the 20th century, Are they signs of natural plasma or of something not of this Earth? NASA has studied atmospheric plasmas, glowing orbs of ionized gas that hover unpredictably. But to some, these lights whisper of visitors from beyond, their technology brushing against ours, leaving behind trails of absence. And yet, the legend persists, because stories are not only about numbers, they are about meaning. For those who wait on the shore, absence is not a statistic. It is a haunting. Each vanishing carries the weight of mystery, no matter how science may frame it. And so the silence endures. The triangle remains both place and symbol, a reminder that even in the age of satellites and science, the ocean keeps its shadows. Theories rise and fall, but the abyss remains, whispering its unanswered questions into the tide.
The Cold War-era technological eyes, the mid-20th century was a time when the oceans no longer belonged only to merchants and sailors. The Second World War had turned the sea into a chessboard of submarines, aircraft carriers, and convoys. And when the war ended, a new struggle began, a silent contest between superpowers. The Cold War stretched its invisible borders across the globe, and the Bermuda Triangle lay directly within one of its most watched corridors. If myth had already surrounded these waters, technology now amplified the gaze. Radar domes appeared on islands. Nuclear submarines prowled beneath the surface. Satellites, launched into the black silence of space, swept their electronic eyes across the Atlantic. Every vessel, every flight path, every ripple of movement in these waters was recorded with new precision. Yet, even with this expanded vision, the triangle refused to surrender its shadows. The 1940s had already brought one of the triangle's most famous mysteries. Flight 19, the squadron of U.S. Navy bombers lost in 1945 during a routine training mission. Their compasses failed, their voices grew frantic, and then their transmissions fell silent. When rescue aircraft were sent after them, one too vanished. In the years that followed, the Navy poured resources into improving navigation systems, communications, and survival protocols. The Cold War sharpened this question. As nuclear submarines explored the depths, they carried sonar systems capable of mapping the ocean floor in extraordinary detail. What they revealed was unsettling. Beneath the triangle lay a labyrinth of trenches, slopes, and ridges, plunging to depths of over 5 miles. The Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic, ran like a scar beneath these waters. Submariners reported sudden anomalies in sonar readings, echoes that returned distorted, shapes that shifted. Some dismissed these as malfunctions, the inevitable noise of the deep. Others whispered that something vast and unseen was moving there. The race for space, too, turned its instruments upon the seas. Satellites scanned the triangle from orbit, measuring cloud patterns, ocean currents, and magnetic fields. NASA's data confirmed what sailors had long reported. This was a region of volatile weather. Storm cells rose here with peculiar speed. Hexagonal cloud formations, captured in later decades, suggested air bombs of descending wind capable of tearing apart an aircraft. And yet, if satellites revealed the turbulence of the atmosphere, they also revealed its mystery. In their endless streams of data, no single anomaly explained centuries of vanishing. The Cold War era also brought secrecy. With nuclear submarines moving silently beneath these waters, some losses could never be openly acknowledged. When a vessel or aircraft disappeared, was it swallowed by the sea or by the silence of classified operations? In the climate of espionage, the Bermuda Triangle became not only a geographical enigma but a political one. Whispers of cover-ups and concealed tragedies fed into its myth. What could not be spoken became part of the legend, and so the triangle became layered with new meaning. It was no longer merely a maritime puzzle. It was a crucible where human technology, radar, sonar, satellites, collided with the raw unpredictability of the sea. If the age of exploration had revealed the triangle as a place of whispers and warnings, the age of technology transformed it into a paradox. A zone where the more humanity saw, the less it understood. Philosophers of science sometimes note that progress does not erase mystery. It deepens it. Each layer of technology removes one veil but reveals another, thinner and stranger. The Cold War era proved this in the Bermuda Triangle. Submarines, satellites, and radars lifted the myth from folklore into the realm of data. But the data itself became part of the enigma, a language of absence and anomaly. The Cold War, with all its eyes, never solved the riddle. It only magnified the stage. Theories of time-space, the sea has always been vast, but the Bermuda Triangle seemed to stretch vastness into something else. Something not merely physical but metaphysical. By the late 20th century, as scientific tools scanned its waters and myths lingered in its silence, speculation took a new turn. No longer confined to storms and currents, the imagination reached further into time itself, into the fabric of space. If the triangle could not be explained by ordinary physics, perhaps it belonged to extraordinary physics. The idea was not born from fantasy alone. The mid-1900s saw a revolution in human understanding of the universe. Einstein's theory of relativity had reshaped the very concepts of space and time, revealing them as woven together into a single continuum, space-time. In this fabric, mass could bend reality, time could dilate, and the impossible could become permissible under the right conditions. If black holes could twist space-time into funnels where time slows and light cannot escape, could smaller, subtler distortions occur here on Earth? And if so, could the Bermuda Triangle be one of them? The reports seemed to whisper yes. Pilots spoke of skies that turned unnaturally green, of cloud walls that opened like tunnels, of clocks that spun strangely fast or froze altogether. Sailors reported sailing for days yet covering distances that made no sense. Most of these tales, no doubt, could be chalked up to error, fear, or exaggeration. But some defied easy dismissal. In 1970, a pilot named Bruce Jernon claimed he flew through a tunnel-like cloud in the triangle and emerged 100 miles farther along his route than his fuel or time should have allowed. He spoke of electronic instruments failing, of haze that shimmered like an electromagnetic field. The scientific community treated his account with skepticism, yet it entered the lore as a rare glimpse of space-time behaving strangely close to home. Theories blossomed from such stories. One suggested that the triangle might conceal a natural wormhole, a shortcut through space-time, permitted by Einstein's equations but thought to exist only in the extreme gravity of black holes or in the hypothetical structures of quantum fields. A wormhole in the Atlantic would not swallow light and matter as a black hole does. Instead, it might displace them, carrying them elsewhere, or else simply dispersing them into dimensions beyond human perception. No evidence has ever proved such a thing, but in the silence of vanished ships, the possibility feels seductive. Another theory turned to electromagnetic fields. The Earth's magnetosphere shields the planet from solar winds, shaping auroras at the poles. But localized anomalies in magnetic intensity have been measured across the globe, where crustal minerals distort the field. Could the Bermuda Triangle be a nexus of such distortions, a place where navigation instruments falter not just slightly but catastrophically, and where perhaps even space-time itself becomes unstable? Then came quantum speculation. At the smallest scales, particles can exist in multiple states at once, leaping from one position to another without passing through the space in between. The Bermuda Triangle, some suggested, might be a macroscopic echo of this quantum strangeness, a place where probability itself wavers, where outcomes diverge into other realities. Such ideas, while without direct evidence, reveal more about the human urge to explain than about the sea itself. But they capture the essence of the mystery. The triangle forces the mind to expand, to ask whether Earth itself holds hidden laboratories of the cosmos. The Cold War era had taught humanity to watch, to measure, to distrust myths. But the persistence of vanishings in the triangle invited a deeper question. Not only what happens here, but why humans are drawn to interpret it through the lens of time and space. Perhaps it is because the sea itself is timeless. The first to chart its depths in detail were oceanographers. Through the mid-20th century, ships dragged sonar beams across the seafloor, mapping trenches and ridges in painstaking sweeps. What they revealed was startling. The seabed beneath the triangle was no flat plain, but a jagged underworld of canyons and cliffs. The Puerto Rico Trench, plunging more than 28,000 feet, lay like a scar on the map. Submarine landslides, scientists realized, could occur here, releasing sudden bursts of turbulence and triggering tsunamis. What had once been dismissed as supernatural might in truth be the restless geology of the Earth. By the 1970s, satellites joined the search. From orbit, they traced the Gulf Stream with precision, capturing how this great river of ocean water twists and accelerates through the triangle. A ship or aircraft lost within it could be swept away with shocking speed, debris dispersed across thousands of square miles. At the same time, satellites recorded atmospheric anomalies, towering thunderclouds forming with violent suddenness, hexagonal storm patterns linked to microbursts of descending wind. These air bombs, capable of striking with hurricane force, offered one of the most compelling natural explanations for aircraft vanishing without a trace. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard conducted their own inquiries. Naval records revealed that, contrary to myth, the rate of disappearances was not dramatically higher here than in other heavily traveled waters. But their investigations also showed that the conditions of the triangle created perfect traps for error. Compass malfunctions, often attributed to myth, were explained by natural variations in Earth's magnetic field. Ships lost communication because storm-charged air distorted radio signals. Aircraft lost altitude when microbursts struck them unprepared. The explanations were real, grounded, and rational. Yet the cumulative effect of so many overlapping dangers preserved the aura of the inexplicable. In recent decades, new tools have sharpened the gaze. Autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic explorers designed to dive miles beneath the surface, now roam the seabed. They carry cameras, sonar, and chemical sensors, sampling sediments and tracing methane hydrates locked in the ocean floor. These hydrates, crystals of frozen gas, are monitored carefully, for scientists know they could destabilize under shifting temperatures, releasing clouds of methane that make the sea momentarily foam and lose buoyancy. A vessel caught above such an eruption might vanish without warning, leaving little debris behind. Meanwhile, aircraft equipped with advanced radar and satellites equipped with multispectral imaging continue to study the skies above. And still, the testing continues. The Bermuda Triangle is now a living laboratory, a place where meteorology, oceanography, and geology converge. Each storm recorded, each current mapped, each anomaly measured is a step toward stripping the mystery of its veil. Yet, paradoxically, the more science learns, the more the triangle resists. Because what science has found is not a single cause, not a master key, but a convergence. Rogue waves, sudden squalls, magnetic anomalies, methane eruptions, human error. Each alone could explain a disappearance. Together, they create a theater where disaster is more likely, more sudden, more complete. The triangle is not a single enigma but a chorus of natural dangers, amplified by human imagination. And yet, the work does not stop. For science is relentless. Every probe that dives, every satellite that scans, every storm that is dissected adds one more thread of understanding. And yet, even as the data grows, the silence persists. The Bermuda Triangle remains not merely a question of science, but of perception. For even when the laws are understood, the myth remains, woven into culture, history, and imagination. The ocean does not give up its mysteries easily. Science may measure, but the human spirit still feels the pull of the unknown.
The Bermuda Triangle is more than a region on a map. It is a mirror, and in its waters humanity sees not only storms and currents, but its own longing, its own fear, its own need to confront the boundaries of the unknown. For centuries, the ocean has been both cradle and tomb. It gave rise to life, carried ships across continents, and connected civilizations. Yet it has also swallowed them without trace. Nowhere is this duality more haunting than in the Triangle, a stretch of sea that seems to condense all the paradoxes of the ocean into a single space. Here, the currents are faster, the storms sharper, the disappearances more resonant. And so, the Triangle becomes not only a place of tragedy but a symbol of mystery itself. Science has offered explanations: storms, rogue waves, methane, magnetism, human error. Each is compelling, each strips away a piece of the legend. Yet none erases the silence of wreckage, the sudden absence of voices, the way a vessel can slip from certainty into nothingness. Even when the data is clear, the human heart remains unsettled. For mystery is not only about what is unknown, it is about what cannot be forgotten. And perhaps this is the triangle's true power. It forces a reckoning with humility. In an age of satellites, algorithms, and global networks, there remain places where human certainty falters. We map the stars, we split the atom, we trace the birth of the universe itself, and yet, within our own oceans, there are still shadows. Shadows that resist not because they are supernatural, but because they remind us of scale. The sea is vast, we are small, and certainty is fragile. Philosophers have long asked what it means for humanity to live at the edge of the unknown. Some mysteries diminish as science advances, folding neatly into laws and theories. Others, however, expand. The more we look, the deeper they become, not because they defy explanation, but because they reveal how much more remains unexplored. The Bermuda Triangle belongs to this second kind. It is less a puzzle to be solved than a reminder that the world is not yet exhausted, that wonder is still possible. And wonder matters. Myths, legends, and enigmas have always been part of the human journey. They ignite imagination, drive exploration, and push science forward. Would oceanographers have studied rogue waves so carefully if not for the legends of ships vanishing? Would meteorologists have probed microbursts with such intensity without the lure of unexplained disappearances? The triangle, whether myth or fact, has served as a catalyst. It has turned fear into inquiry, mystery into discovery. But beyond science, there is philosophy. What does it mean for a place to be feared for its silence? Perhaps it reflects the deeper truth that human beings are uncomfortable with absence. To lose a ship is tragic, to lose it without a trace is unbearable. Absence demands explanation. And when explanation falters, myth fills the void. The Bermuda Triangle is less about what the sea takes than about what it leaves behind, questions without answers. It is in this space, between knowledge and ignorance, that the triangle lives. Not as coordinates on a map, but as a symbol of all the enigmas that surround us. Black holes in space. Consciousness in the brain. The origin of time itself. The triangle whispers that the unknown is not only out there, in the distant cosmos, but here, within our own Earth, woven into the waves we sail across every day. And the Bermuda Triangle may never yield a single truth, because perhaps it does not hold one. As the waves rise and fall, as ships pass safely through and a few are lost, the triangle continues its silent role, not as a curse, not as a portal, but as a question. A question that endures across centuries, echoing in myths, in data, in the human imagination. And perhaps that is enough. For in mystery, humanity finds not only fear, but meaning. The Bermuda Triangle is not merely a place where vessels vanish. It is a place where certainty itself dissolves into wonder.